Good evening, and welcome to the Poe Museum. My friends Edgar and Pluto devised this contraption to determine what my fate might be if I were to find myself inside one of Poe's terror tales. Let's take a spin and find out my misfortune. While we await the results, why don't you enjoy another installment of the Curator's Crypt? When they're not on public display, a lot of the museum's most important artifacts go into storage. This case houses some of our most important first editions, first printings, and valuable books. Let's take a look. Here you'll see priceless Poe editions, like Al-Araf, Tamerlane, and Minor Poems of 1829. There's only 18 copies left of this book. Or Poems of Edgar A. Poe from 1831. The Raven and Other Poems from 1844. But I want to show you something else. This little book right here it's the album of Edgar Allan Poe's cousin, Amelia Poe. Now, Amelia Poe was one of Edgar's cousins. Now, some of you might know that Poe married his cousin Virginia Clem Poe. Well, Virginia's half-sister was Josephine Poe, who was another cousin, but also half-sisters. They had the same father, but two mothers who were also cousins. The Josephine Poe married Edgar's other cousin, Nelson Poe. Nelson Poe's twin sister was Amelia Poe. So you got it? And this was her album. This is what she kept with her before she got married, and her friends and suitors would write poetry for her, draw pictures, give her souvenirs, which she'd paste into her album. There's little pressed flowers in here. But why should you care about Amelia Poe's album? Well, because it contains the only known manuscript for Poe's classic poem, To Helen, one of his first great hits. He first published it when he was 22 years old in his book Poems in 1831, and continued to revise it extensively and reprint it throughout his career. And it's considered one of the greatest of Poe's poems. It contains those classic lines, to the glory that was Greece, and to the grandeur that was Rome. And it's a celebration of Poe's first great love, the woman Poe called the first purely ideal love of my soul, Jane Stith Craig Stannard. When he was 14, he met her for the first time, and according to his mother-in-law, he was speechless, could hardly breathe, almost passed out right at her feet. Problem was, he was still 14, she was his best friend's mother. Wouldn't have really worked out, but poets like unrequited love. They like to worship somebody from afar. So he continued to visit her when he was visiting her son, and he would show her his poetry. At this time, Poe had already tried to have a book of his poetry published, and his foster father showed it to his headmaster. The headmaster said, Poe's a little bit too proud of himself already. If you let him publish a book of poetry this early, you'll never hear the end of it. So Mr. Allen, Poe's foster father, discouraged Poe from wasting his time writing poetry. It wasn't useful pursuit. He didn't want him reading all this Lord Byron garbage, these romantic poets. But Poe found the encouragement he needed in Jane Stannard. And she became his first poetic ideal, and that's why he called her the first purely ideal love of my soul. and he praises her beauty into Helen. Helen, thy beauty is to me like those Nicean barks of yore, which gently over the perfumed sea the weary, wayward wanderer bore to his own native shore. Shortly after Poe met Jane Stannard, she went insane and died. Is buried here at Shockoe Hill Cemetery in Richmond. It's said that for nights after her death, he kept a midnight vigil at this grave. And over a decade later, after he was married, he used to take his wife up here on Sunday afternoon strolls to show her the grave of his beloved Helen. This plaque was placed at the base of Jane Stannard's gravestone in 1923 by the Poe Museum. It contains a quote not from To Helen, but from the Valley Niece that goes, "Helen, like thy human eye, there the uneasy violets lie. There the reedy grass doth wave over the old forgotten grave. One by one from the tree top, there the eternal dews do drop." And because it mentions violets here, one of the Poe Museum supporters, John W. Robertson, who operated the Livermore Insane Asylum in California, sent 100 violets to be planted on her grave at that time. This was in celebration of the Poe Museum's first anniversary. This was going to be a big event. They invited 3 United States presidents come to the first anniversary of the Poe Museum. It was Harding, Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson at least said he would try to come, but didn't. And Warren G. Harding said, well, I'm sorry, I can't come. I have to travel out west instead. So he traveled out to California and died. So if Warren G. Harding had come to the Poe Museum instead, he might still be alive today. So what's so special about this poem? Well, this particular manuscript is unique. What we love to see in Poe's manuscripts is how he revised them, edited them over time. And this one is different from all the printed versions. In fact, it's only containing the first stanza, it cuts out the other 2, and it shows you Poe's thought process. This is us getting inside of Poe's mind and watching as he composes his poetry over the course of years. It's the next best thing you get to actually standing over him while he wrote. And this thing was completely forgotten for decades. Amelia Poe's granddaughter gave this album along with some other Poe family pieces like a genealogy and some dancing shoes that Poe's wife's father bought in London in 1805. Gave them all to the Poe Museum in 1930. And it was listed in our session book as Amelia Poe's scrapbook. And it wasn't displayed, it was just in storage. And in 2012, I was looking through the collections. We were doing a regular inventory, and I decided, well, what could be in Amelia Poe's album? What sort of things did she have? And we just happened to look through the pages and found this poem signed E.A.P. So, of course, we showed to different experts, and they confirmed this was not only Poe's handwriting, this was the only known copy of one of his first great poems by his own hand. So a great addition to the Poe Museum, even though we technically already had the whole time. So now when you go back to your attics, check inside and see what kind of treasures you might already have there that you never knew about. And if they're at all Poe related, be sure to donate them right here to the Poe Museum. The device has yielded less than favorable results. Well, while I search for my head, I'll have to bid you adieu until the next installment of the Curator's Crypt.